What's going on, guys, and welcome to another tutorial here on our channel, The Guide. My name is Valerio, and today we have a top 5 dribbling techniques video. After posting videos on dedicated dribbling techniques, for example, we've done a slow dribbling or precision dribbling video, we've done a strafe dribbling video, we often get questions, how do we know which dribbling technique to use for which scenario? Because sometimes two different techniques might have the same strength depending on the situation. So hopefully in today's video, this overview will help you guys get a clear understanding on the matter. On top of that, we did have a patch on FIFA 20 recently, and it did affect dribbling. So you will also find some additional tips and tricks that we haven't included already because of the changes that the patch brought about. First though, a friendly reminder that we do have some new deals on the coaching website. You can now find an option to purchase bundles, combining the classic 1v1 coaching with the new online course that was recently released. And if you book 3 hours of coaching, you get 20 euros off for the online course. This is available for every tier, and it's a good combination to get the most out of the extra material of the online course, which, by the way, is also 3.5 hours of video material in total. So if you're interested in that, you can find the links to all of that in the description below. And now, without further ado, let's get into the video. As basic as the concept of left stick dribbling is, it's important to start off with it in this video and include it because the purpose of this video is not only to outline the best dribbling techniques in the game, but how to decide when to use which technique for what situation. So obviously, as the name suggests, left stick dribbling simply involves moving around, as you can see on the screen, by only and exclusively using the left analog stick and nothing else. And this is the most basic and common approach, as you can obviously imagine, and you can consider it almost the basis for all other types of dribbling. You're going to want to use left stick dribbling pretty much most of the time. It's going to be your go-to method, and anything else can be considered an extension of this method for particular situations. Whenever you find yourself in your own half, whether you're dribbling with defensive midfielders, fullbacks, or center backs, or maybe even sometimes your keeper in tough situations, for the most part, you are not going to be using players that have that great dribbling stats. So in those situations, you want to keep it as simple as possible. And in your own half, left stick is almost always the way to go because your main focus should be to move the ball around, get it into the opponent's half, into the better dribblers. Now, in the opponent's half, more advanced dribbling techniques can give you more time and space on the ball, and sometimes they work really well. But if there's no reason to do so, if for whatever reason your opponent doesn't press you, is giving you the space, and you don't have to worry about ball contacts as much, which we'll get into more later, then by all means use left stick dribbling. But of course, a critical type of scenario where left stick remains the best choice, irrelevant of certain nuances, is going to be when you get the ball in the box to an offensive player and you want to wiggle, so to speak, for a quick turn and shot. We'll get more into it when we come across alternatives, but for some of these tighter situations in the box where a very effective FIFA 20 method to score is again turning and shooting, less is often more, and you can easily rely on the most basic of dribbling methods, that is left stick dribbling, for these types of goal scoring opportunities. And now the variations we'll get into shortly for the further more advanced dribbling techniques will have their own place, so let's get into that. Sprinting requires you to hold down R2 or RT depending on your console, and this will maximize your player's speed. And I briefly mentioned ball contacts earlier on in the video, but this is where this concept starts to build up a little bit. And we spoke about it also in a previous video that still holds a lot of relevance to this day. Nonetheless, as you're going at max speed, your player boots the ball further ahead of him, and so he has less ball contacts and thus less touches per step than a classic left stick dribbler would have. Having less ball contacts can become a problem because without contacting the ball, you can't change direction, you can't pass it off, you can't shoot, so you do leave yourself open to be tackled in those situations. And this concept is a timeless one, so for more of an in-depth talk and approach on this concept, you can find a link to the relevant video in the description below. If you haven't already gotten this advice, a very common tip to attack better is to try and focusing on letting go of the sprint buttons. And many times this can be true, as a lot of people rush their attacks, particularly in FIFA 20. That is a game that rewards patience, because otherwise if you sprint too long, you end up running into dead ends. And so for that reason, it's important to save the sprint button for moments where you are certain it'll benefit you. The most obvious, for example, being in counterattacks with large open patches of grass ahead of you where you can safely push into, while also at the same time having enough time to react early enough to any incoming pressure. And so while this is a very situational tool, because again, you have to be careful of how the ball contacts work and the spaces you plan to sprint into, its biggest weakness can sometimes be mitigated by using certain skill moves. For example, the ball roll in combination with the sprint, which allows you, when you perform the ball roll at the end of a sprint, to sharply turn away from pressure. Additionally, you can even use the sprint in combination with the 45-degree fake shot to change your angle rapidly. Now, both of these tools, that is the ball roll and the 45-degree fake shot, are discussed more in depth in various videos. So of course, we'll link to that and have note cards on the top of your screen where you can click and check those out. But they do go hand in hand with high velocity sprinting situations because of the way they make sharp changes occur while your players is going at maximum momentum. A final thing to note would be depending on your personal controller settings. And in terms of controller settings, we have a specific video for every setting available. So if you want to check that out, of course, link will also be available. The option of analog sprint is the one that we're focused on right now when we're talking about sprinting, and it's usually on by default. So if you haven't changed anything, you have access to it. If you have it off, you might want to consider turning it on depending on what your needs are. But leaving it on means that you can control the speed of the sprint depending on how hard you press the sprint button, meaning that fully holding it down all the way would make your player sprint at full speed, and holding it partially, for example, only halfway, would obviously keep some of that speed in check and make your player speed approximately 50% of his maximum speed. So in combination, or similarly to how the skill moves like the ball roll and the fake shot go in combination with the sprint, this feature as well would help you mitigate one of the weaknesses of the sprint and allow you to control it a little bit better if you can get used to it. Slow dribbling, which we sometimes refer to as precision dribbling, is a topic that we actually just recently went really in depth on in a dedicated video, and you can check that video out on the channel as well, as it goes into much more detail specific to the move and has plenty of other examples to learn from. That being said, to perform the slow dribbling feature, you hold down both your bumpers L2 and R2, or LT and RT, depending on your console. And as you can see from the screen, the ball contacts dramatically increase. The player takes way more touches, moves a lot slower, and so in contrast to the sprint, this can leave your opponent with far less windows of opportunities to tackle you. And because you keep the ball so close to your feet, you can sort of shield the ball away from your opponent. So you'd imagine that a main way to use this feature would be to dribble around players. And sometimes it is a very useful thing to do in those situations. However, it's definitely not the main way to be used, at least in FIFA 20, because a weakness of this move is that overdoing it is quite easy. You can easily get too far ahead of yourself. You remain very stationary, and so if the opponent catches onto you, it's a strong possibility for you to eventually lose the ball. So you have to be really careful for those scenarios. This is also a reason why earlier I mentioned that normal left stick is probably the easiest and most efficient option when you get the ball into the box to your striker and you want to turn and shoot. This move, however, truly shines when talking about buying yourself time. Not only because you keep the ball super close to you and you can use that to double the time you'd usually have, but also because releasing the ball while slow dribbling is a very reliable thing to do, at least relative to while you're using other dribbling methods. You can even use it in combination with other dribbling mechanics, for example with the sprint, as a mechanism to slow down and transition from high pace and low ball contacts to low pace and high ball contacts. Like with slow dribbling, we have a dedicated video that focuses only and specifically on the strafe dribbling feature, so if you haven't already, definitely check that video out. That being said, to strafe dribble, you've got to press L1 or LB depending on your console, and when you do it this way, the game will always turn you towards the opposition's net. So to strafe dribble at a locked angle, and so wherever you like and wherever you want to face, simply press both L1 and R1 or LB and RB, and you'll be able to lock your body's angle and strafe wherever you want to be facing. Personally, I would always recommend using the locked angle, as that way whenever you want to do it, you just use it and you never have to be worried about where you're facing, if the game's going to turn you around or not. In terms of its benefits, similar to the slow dribble feature, it does a decent job of buying you time prior to a pass. The method is just a little bit different. So if a pass you're looking for is blocked, you can often strafe to either side and find a new angle and a new passing lane that isn't covered. Compared to the slow dribble, however, the movement is faster, and you do though have to be very careful sometimes, because the slow dribble in comparison has better release times, meaning that with the strafe dribbling, there's always the risk that the pass would take a little bit too long than what you would desire, as opposed to executing the pass immediately after an input. Another classic way to use it is when under pressure, when someone's running in behind you and you pull it back using the strafe dribble, changing direction really fast and then sending the defender a completely different way. And you will have to keep in mind that unlike the slow dribble, strafe dribbling is completely dependent on your ability to move correctly. What that means is that you don't shield the ball as well with the strafe dribble like you would with the slow dribble. So what you gain in speed, you lose in ball protection. However, with the most recent patch, the strafe dribble feature arguably has a new, most efficient use, and you can now exit the strafe dribble really explosively when combined with the sprint button. The key is to exit at the correct angles, and I found that 30 degrees typically works quite well. When done correctly, your player will explode into space and you can catch defenses off guard. It's definitely something that we all need to get used to, because when you do this correctly, especially against defenses that sit deep, you'll be able to gain numerical superiority. When we think of shielding, we usually think of protecting the ball somewhere in or around the box with some sort of target man or a physical striker. And to use the shield feature, simply hold down LT or L2 depending on your console. This will make your player put his body between the ball and the defensive opponent in an attempt to shield him away from the ball. There will be times where you work the ball up the field and no options are available, so in and around the box, this is definitely the go-to move to hold up the play and wait for an option to appear. The downside is, of course, that there is a limit to how much time you can buy yourself, and obviously the smaller or weaker your player is up top performing the shielding feature to hold up the play, the less time you'll have available to do so. And if you get too carried away with who you're shielding and with for how long, you'll definitely lose the ball, because center backs obviously tend to have very high physical stats. It's also a move to keep in mind if you're someone who likes to play corners short, because you will definitely have noticed that oftentimes you will work the ball around the box on the edge, and sometimes a center back who just came out of the box will receive the ball. And in those moments, it makes no sense to left stick dribble, to slow dribble, or strafe dribble excessively, because obviously most center backs won't be able to perform those effectively. But the shielding makes use of the center back's general physical superiority, and that allows you to hold up the play in those situations and make the best out of having the ball with some of your worst dribbles in your team on the edge of the box. And finally, another way to use this feature is in a running duel, because there will be times that you'll have an opportunity to squeeze away while an opponent is charging at you at full speed. And by using the shielding feature in these moments, you'll have to repeatedly press the L2 button, and this will allow you to push away incoming pressure and, like I said, squeeze away in situations where it may have looked like the opponent could have pushed you off the ball. A common question we commonly get asked is how do we know what type of dribbling feature to use in which situation? And the purpose of this video was to help you guys in answering that specific question. As we discussed, they all have their own place, but it can get confusing because you soon realize that many features can do the same thing. For example, technically you could argue that slow dribbling, strafe dribbling, and shielding all work well in buying you time. But arguably, it's best to use slow dribbling if we're talking about buying yourself some time, because of the reason that releasing the ball while you're slow dribbling feels the most responsive. However, if you're around the box and you're looking for hold-up play to buy you time, then you'd want to use shielding. And if you already see a pass and all you have to do to create the gap is move sideways, then perhaps you'd rather use the strafe because you can move sideways a lot faster. These are the small details that hopefully will help you guys understand more specifically how to decide what dribbling feature to use and when. But that's going to be it from me today. So if you have found this helpful, drop a thumbs up and subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. We also want to thank our elite supporters over on Patreon, and if you're interested, you can become a patron today to support the channel as well as receive cool benefits in return over at patreon.com/BPG The Guide.